All right. So with abundant life, there's more than one aspect to this. I mean, um, there is the emotional, just replenishing, respite, um, opportunity to have a break, recharge your batteries, and get back out there. There's that aspect to it, but there's also kind of a spiritual aspect to it. And I don't just mean in terms of transcendent cause, but more in terms of practicing the presence of God in your life. And obviously, this is something for your spiritual clients, and certainly something that you'll be able to share with one another in our coach training exercises. But to illustrate this concept, when I was younger, my parents owned a restaurant, and in the restaurant, they had this gigantic wooden keg or barrel, however you think about it. Up north, we call it a barrel. Down south here, I tend to call it a keg. And this big giant barrel was behind the bar, and it had a bunch of different taps on it with different beverages. And you'd put your cup up to the tap and pull the tap, and the beverage would come out. And as a kid, I always thought I didn't understand how it worked. It was like this magical barrel. It had all these different beverages inside of one big barrel that was back there behind the bar. And then later, I learned as I got older and started working there that each one of those taps on the barrel, actually, there was a plastic little tube that went from the tap down through the floor into the basement, where the actual kegs were of the various different beverages, and that big wooden barrel was just kind of a facade. And so, making an analogy here, in life, you have these taps, think of them as taps on your barrel. And when you put your cup up to them, you hope that you'll be able to fill your cup with what comes out of that tap, except they're not actually taps. They are people, places, things, experiences that are in your life that are filling you, not with a liquid beverage, but with love, grace, peace, belonging, understanding, joy, all of those good things in life that we get from the stuff that's on our hearts list. You might say that the things that are on your hearts list are the taps on your barrel. Now, the mistake that we made, like the mistake that I made when I was a kid, is that we mistake the conduit for the source. Those taps on that big facade wooden barrel, that was just a conduit. It wasn't actually the source of the liquid. Just like the people, places, things, activities in your life that bring you joy, grace, comfort, etc., they are just conduits. Now, why do I say they're conduits? Well, because they have a creator. They aren't causes in and of themselves. They didn't will themselves into being. They were created. They were created by a purpose, for a purpose, by a creator who, intentionally placed them in your life. And there's a reason that they're meant to be there. These people, places, things, experiences, etc. So the source is God. The people, places, things are the conduit. What are they conduits of? They're conduits of His presence in your life. So it's having this perspective, bringing this perspective to your hearts list is a way to practice the presence of God, to make God's presence tangible in your life. So if you're out in nature and it's a particularly beautiful day and you just feel peace and you're overwhelmed by the beauty and the bigness of it all, and the gratitude that you have for that day, that is a conduit of God's grace, peace, and presence in your life. And so rather than saying, oh, what a beautiful day, which it is, and you can enjoy it on that level, but then you can also say, if you bring a spiritual sense to this, it's, what a beautiful day that God has given me to enjoy because He loves me. Or when my children give me a hug, my children all give great hugs. And when they give me a hug, I think, you know, I love this child, and I love the hug, and it feels so good. But it's not just from my child. They're the conduit, but the source is God, because he's the one who's given me these children. When I do this ministry, this service of either coaching or therapy or training, and I love doing it. I really enjoy it. And I've had the opportunity to see wonderful life transformation people, and also to be with people in some really hard times and to hopefully bring some comfort. But I thank God for that as a conduit of his provision and his love for me, that I get to do this stuff every day. And, you know, my wife, family members, you know, particularly wonderful time of worship, or particularly meaningful passage of scripture, or you know, got into running recently. I really enjoy it, and sometimes have really great runs. And I just have a number of things in my life really that are conduits of God's grace, peace, gentleness, kindness, provision, all of that good stuff. And so now, going back to the analogy, sometimes it's not a particularly great run. Sometimes it's not a particularly great day at work. Sometimes relationships aren't going particularly great, okay? Back to my analogy with the big wooden barrel, every now and then you would put your cup up to the tap, and you would pull it, and it would smell bad. And so what I've learned back then, and if you're ever in a establishment and your beverage comes out of one of those taps and it doesn't taste right, doesn't smell right, it's probably because the lines need to be cleaned. So those plastic tubes that go from the tap down to wherever the keg or barrel is stored, they get kind of gunky after a while. They need to be cleaned out, and you have to disconnect them and run this solution down there and clean it all out, and it's kind of gross and it smells bad. But if you don't, then you get these skunky beverages. So likewise, when a person, place, thing in your life that is a normally very clean and effective conduit of God's grace and presence in your life, it's not going right, say, well, you know, maybe there's something wrong with the line, something between the conduit and the Creator that just isn't going right, or needs to be cleaned out, or whatever. But the good thing is that as you practice this spiritual discipline, you have more than just one tap on the barrel, right? More than just one conduit of God's grace in your life. Switching metaphors, like a diversified stock portfolio. If one goes down, you still have others that are keeping you up. You're not going to lose everything in one stock. You're not going to put all your eggs in one basket, if we can just add one more metaphor here. So it is important to not only practice God's presence in this way, but to practice his presence in a variety of ways through the various people, places, things that you're involved with, whether they are overtly spiritual, like a ministry that you do at church, or something that you do through your church, like even just attending on Sunday morning, for example, or your small group, or whatever, wherever you're spiritually fed by your spiritual community, or by something where you're experiencing God's general revelation, what Scripture calls general revelation, not Scripture itself, but the things that God has made, the things that he has created for our benefit and to bless us. So it is when clients are feeling disconnected from God, when you're feeling disconnected from God and you just want a reminder of his presence and love in your life, remember this thing about the conduits in the barrel and all that, because, you know, if you have enough taps on your barrel, then there's always going to be a place that you can go to get your cup filled, to experience God's presence in your life, not in a way that you just have to read about, but in a way that you can see and feel and touch. And it really brings your relationship to life with him if you can begin to practice this. So I hope that makes sense to you, and that you're able to implement that into your spiritual life, and that it's a blessing to both you and to your future clients. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.